Silence has a way of ambushing you. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask permission. It just walks in, sits down beside you, and starts revealing things you've been avoiding for years. And if you're honest, you know exactly what I mean. Maybe it happens late at night when the house is finally still. Maybe it hits you after a long day when you close the door behind you and realize there's no one around to give you a sense of direction. Or maybe it happens in the most unexpected places, driving alone down an empty highway, sitting in a quiet office after everyone's gone home, or standing in your own kitchen wondering how a room can feel so full of noise when all you hear is your own thoughts. Americans don't talk about this often, but we feel it constantly. We've built an entire culture around staying busy, around making sure we never have to sit alone with ourselves. Work longer hours. Fill every moment with notifications. Scroll until our eyelids burn. Add more to the schedule just to avoid the quiet. And yet, even with all of that, silence still finds us. It always does. What most people don't realize is that loneliness isn't actually about being without others. It's about being confronted with yourself. Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who understood the human heart better than most therapists today, said that the real crisis of loneliness comes from facing the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And let's be honest, every one of us has a version we perform. The I'm fine version. The I've got everything together version. The I'm busy so I must be important version. These characters help us move through the world, but they also keep us disconnected from our real selves. And the moment silence takes the stage, those characters start to crack. You know that feeling, the sudden heaviness, the discomfort you can't quite explain, the urge to turn on music or call someone or check your phone for the 100th time. That discomfort is not loneliness. It's recognition. It's your deeper self tapping you on the shoulder, saying, "Hey, I'm still here. Why do you keep running away from me?" Think about this. When was the last time you were fully alone without reaching for a distraction? When was the last time you sat with your thoughts long enough to hear what they were actually trying to say? We're not afraid of silence. We're afraid of what silence reveals. Loneliness is the mirror we don't want to look into. And not because we don't like the reflection, but because it shows us how far we've drifted from the person we were meant to become. That's why so many Americans fear downtime. That's why weekends feel strange when we don't pack them with activities. That's why vacations stress people out more than work. They're forced to slow down, forced to face the questions they've been dodging for years. Who am I when no one needs me? Who am I when I'm not performing? Who am I when the world gets quiet? And here's the truth most people won't tell you: the emptiness you feel in those moments isn't a flaw. It's a message. It's your inner compass screaming that something is off. Kierkegaard called this existential despair, a deep internal discomfort that has nothing to do with external circumstances. You can be surrounded by people, successful, admired, even loved, and still feel completely disconnected from yourself. That's why some of the loneliest people live in the biggest cities. That's why someone can be in a long-term relationship and still feel hollow. It's not the absence of company. It's the absence of connection with yourself. And when silence forces you to confront that absence, the shock hits hard. But here's where the shift begins. Silence isn't the enemy. It's the invitation. It's the doorway you keep walking past. It's the only environment where the truth can actually speak. Because when the noise fades, when the schedule is empty, when the phone stops buzzing, when the room finally settles, you can hear things you've muted for years. Dreams you abandoned. Fears you buried. Parts of yourself you never allowed to grow. Silence becomes a kind of spiritual spotlight, exposing everything you've avoided but also illuminating everything you're capable of becoming. And I want you to understand something. If you are feeling this discomfort, if you have moments where the quiet feels heavy or strange, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something inside you is waking up. It means your inner life is tired of being ignored. It means the deeper, truer version of you wants to return. In an age where everyone is performing, pretending, posting, and constantly proving themselves, the courage to sit with your own company is revolutionary. So let me ask you directly, Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when the world goes silent? Can you stand with yourself? Can you listen to your own truth without drowning it in noise? These questions aren't meant to intimidate you. They're meant to guide you. Because loneliness isn't a curse. It's the beginning of clarity. It's the beginning of your return home, to yourself. Silence doesn't expose your weakness. It reveals your path. And if you've been feeling that inner pull, that ache, that strange sense that something is missing, then I want you to know this: the thing you're missing is you. And this journey, this dive into silence, is where you'll finally meet the person you've been running from your entire life. If you've ever had that moment when silence hits you like a punch, when something inside whispers, "This isn't who I really am," then you've already felt the crash I'm about to describe. Because loneliness doesn't hurt because you're alone. It hurts because the version of you that shows up in public finally collides with the version of you that's been buried for years. And that collision is brutal. Every one of us performs. We perform at work. We perform in relationships. We perform online more than anywhere else. We put on the strong one mask, the successful one mask, that I'm doing great mask, even when deep down we're exhausted, confused, or completely disconnected from what we actually want. And in American culture, those masks are rewarded. You get praised for being put together, admired for being busy, respected for keeping your emotions neatly tucked away. But the problem is this: the longer you perform, the easier it becomes to forget who you are underneath. Kierkegaard called this the sickness of the self, the moment when the real you and the performed you drift so far apart that you can't feel whole anymore. And you know exactly when that happens. It hits you during those moments you don't post about. The moment you get home after smiling all day and feel the heaviness settle in your chest. The moment you try to relax on a Sunday and instead feel a sinking dread you can't explain. The moment someone asks, "How are you really doing?" and you don't even know how to answer because you're not sure who you is anymore. Think about how many roles you play in a single day. The competent professional. The dependable partner. The parent who holds everything together. The friend who listens. The adult who is supposed to know what they're doing. It's no wonder the real you gets lost behind the roles. And here's the painful truth: the more you adapt to what the world expects, the less space you leave for your own truth. That's why silence feels threatening. It tears the mask off. It exposes the tension between your outer life and your inner life. And that tension? That's the real source of loneliness. You don't fear being alone. You fear sitting in a room with the parts of yourself you've ignored. You fear confronting the decisions you made to please others. You fear admitting that the life you're living may not be the one you want. You fear that if you stop performing, if you let the real you appear, everything around you might change. And yes, that fear makes sense. Because authenticity is disruptive. It's powerful. It's honest. And honesty shakes foundations. Psychology has a word for this crisis: identity dissonance. It happens when the person you show the world no longer matches the person inside. And this dissonance doesn't show up as one big meltdown. It shows up subtly, quietly, every single day. In the form of chronic fatigue, emotional numbness, impulsive decisions, a constant need to stay busy, the inability to rest, the sinking feeling that you're performing your own life instead of living it. And then, when everything goes silent, when you're alone in your car or walking through a quiet grocery store or lying in bed at night, that dissonance becomes impossible to hide. Here's the part most people never admit: the persona you crafted wasn't created out of malice. It was created out of necessity. You built it because you needed approval, acceptance, stability, love. Because somewhere along the line, someone taught you that the real you wasn't enough. So you adjusted. You adapted. You perfected being who you thought you had to be. And in doing that, you drifted away from who you actually are. This is why loneliness feels heavy even when your life looks full. This is why people with families, careers, and friends still feel an ache they can't explain. Because loneliness isn't about lack of people. It's about lack of alignment. When your outer identity grows louder than your inner identity, your soul starts to starve. And no amount of success, attention, or validation can feed it. But here's the turning point, and it's important. That moment when the mask cracks, when silence exposes the distance between your two selves, is not a failure. It's an invitation. It's the moment your deeper self says, enough. It's time to come home. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot and start listening to the part of you that's been quiet for too long. And yes, that process is uncomfortable. Yes, it brings up fear, grief, and regret. But it also brings clarity, freedom, power, the beginning of an authentic life. Ask yourself right now, what parts of me are real and what parts are performance? Where am I pretending? Where am I betraying myself to keep the peace? What truths have I buried because they were inconvenient or scary or didn't fit the image I wanted to protect? These questions aren't easy. They're not supposed to be. But they are the doorway to alignment. And without alignment, there is no peace. The truth is, the person you perform may be impressive. They may be admired. They may be successful. But they're not you. And until you reconnect with the real you, the flawed, honest, unfinished version, you will always feel that quiet ache at the end of the day. That ache is not loneliness. It's homesickness. Homesickness for your own soul. So yes, the crash between your real self and the self you perform can feel devastating. But once the dust settles, once you stop running and finally listen, you'll discover something life-changing. The real you has been waiting with open arms. And that reunion is the start of everything you've been longing for. There comes a moment in every adult life when you look around at the noise, the pressure, the expectations, and you think, I just need a minute. A minute without other people's opinions. A minute without performance. A minute without the constant hum of life demanding something from you. And when that moment arrives, something surprising happens. The silence doesn't feel empty anymore, it feels like relief. It feels like oxygen. It feels like you. That feeling is the doorway to something Schopenhauer understood a long time ago. Solitude is not a punishment. It's a form of power. We've been trained to see being alone as a sign that something is wrong with us. If you go to a restaurant alone, people assume you're lonely. If you spend a Saturday by yourself, people think you're depressed. If you enjoy your own company, someone will eventually say, "Are you okay?" As if being with yourself is a condition that needs treatment. But Schopenhauer flipped that idea on its head. He believed that only those who have a rich inner world can truly appreciate solitude. The more depth a person has, the more they prefer silence over noise, presence over distraction, inner strength over outer validation. And if you're honest, you know this to be true. Think about the most grounded moments of your life. Maybe it was a road trip where the highway stretched out for miles and your mind finally cleared. Maybe it was a sunrise you watched alone before anyone else woke up. Maybe it was a long walk in a quiet neighborhood where, for the first time in weeks, your thoughts made sense again. Those moments weren't lonely. They were nourishing. They didn't drain you, they restored you. And that's exactly what Schopenhauer meant. Solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the presence of clarity. But somewhere along the way, modern culture twisted the narrative. We live in a world obsessed with constant interaction, networking, group chats, meetings, calls, notifications, staying connected. People brag about being busy, as if exhaustion is a badge of honor. We fear missing out. We fear being forgotten. We fear falling behind. So we stay plugged in, overstimulated, overwhelmed, and absolutely disconnected from our inner life. And then we wonder why we're exhausted. Why we're anxious. Why we feel empty even in a crowded room. It's because the mind wasn't designed for constant noise. It was designed for rhythm, engagement, then retreat. Connection, then solitude. Expression, then reflection. Without solitude, reflection dies. And without reflection, authenticity dies. And without authenticity, life becomes a performance you can't escape. Schopenhauer saw solitude as a sanctuary, the place where your best thoughts are born, where your real values emerge, where your creativity wakes up, where your inner voice becomes audible. He believed that people who depend on constant company do so not because they love others, but because they fear themselves. They can't stand the silence. They can't bear their own thoughts. They need distraction to survive. But the people who are comfortable being alone? Those are the ones who have discovered their depth. And here's the truth most people won't tell you: if you can't enjoy your own presence, no relationship will ever feel fully satisfying. You'll always need something from others: approval, attention, reassurance, and that need will eventually drain the connection. But when you learn to stand strong in your own solitude, something incredible happens. You bring fullness into your relationships instead of hunger. You bring clarity instead of confusion. You bring presence instead of neediness. That's the difference between relationships built from overflow and relationships built from emptiness. Schopenhauer understood another uncomfortable truth: most social interactions are shallow. Not because people are bad, but because depth is rare. He believed that truly introspective, thoughtful individuals naturally seek more solitude because they don't want to dilute their energy in environments where nothing meaningful happens. And if you've ever walked into a room full of small talk and instantly felt drained, you know exactly what he meant. If you've ever had to leave a party early because the noise felt suffocating, you know what he meant. If you've ever sat in your car for an extra 5 minutes just to have a moment alone, you know what he meant. There is nothing wrong with you for wanting space. There is nothing weak about needing silence. There is nothing strange about preferring solitude over empty noise. It simply means you have a rich interior life, and that is a strength. But let's be honest, becoming comfortable with solitude isn't easy. It requires facing yourself. It requires listening to the thoughts you usually drown with distractions. It requires sitting with your emotions instead of running from them. And that's why most people avoid it. It forces a confrontation. Your fears, your regrets, your unmet desires, your disappointments, all of it rises to the surface. But here's the part people forget: once the storm passes, something extraordinary remains. Peace. Clarity. Strength. The kind of strength you can't get from applause, compliments, or social validation. So let me ask you, what if solitude isn't a void but a vessel? What if alone time isn't a weakness but a resource? What if the most powerful version of your life won't come from adding more people, more noise, more distractions, but from stripping all of that away until the real you has room to breathe? Schopenhauer would say this: the ability to be alone is the ultimate test of inner maturity. Not because solitude isolates you, but because it reveals you. It shows whether your inner world is a home or a battlefield. And the good news? You can transform it into a home. So the next time you feel drawn to silence, don't run. Don't apologize. Don't second guess yourself. Lean in. That pull toward solitude may be the most honest instinct you have. It's the instinct of a person who is ready to grow, ready to deepen, ready to live a life built from the inside out. Solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the foundation of it. And once you claim it, once you learn to be strong in your own presence, you'll discover something life-changing. You were never afraid of being alone. You were afraid of never meeting the person you could become there. There's a specific kind of emptiness that shows up when you're alone. Not the dramatic movie kind. Not the cinematic existential crisis. I'm talking about the quiet, subtle ache, the one that hits you when you're driving home after a long day and suddenly feel nothing. The one that creeps in on Sunday afternoons when the house is clean, the chores are done, and there's nothing left to distract you. The one that whispers, "Is this really it?" even though your life looks perfectly normal from the outside. That emptiness has a root. And until you understand it, nothing, no relationship, no achievement, no distraction, will fill it. We tend to think emptiness comes from lack. If I had more friends. If I had a partner. If I made more money. If I lived somewhere else. If my life were more exciting. But emptiness doesn't come from what's missing outside. It comes from what's missing inside. It's not a hole created by absence, it's a space carved out by avoidance. You're not hollow because you're alone. You're hollow because there's a part of you you've abandoned for years. And the silence finally exposes it. Most Americans live in a constant state of reaction. Wake up, get ready, commute, work, scroll, answer emails, take care of family, squeeze in some self-care, crash, repeat. Life becomes a treadmill you can't step off. And in all that motion, you stop asking yourself the most important questions. What do I actually want? What do I genuinely feel? What parts of my life do I show up to because I choose to, and what parts because I'm afraid not to? Eventually you lose touch with the deeper you, the one who carries your values, dreams, creativity, intuition. And when that connection breaks, emptiness appears like a warning light on the dashboard of the soul. Psychology has been trying to tell us this for decades. When you live your life chasing approval, fitting into expectations, suppressing your real emotions, or ignoring unresolved wounds, you create internal dissonance. And dissonance always leads to emptiness. Want an example? Think about a child who was taught to keep quiet to keep the peace. They grow up believing their inner voice doesn't matter. So as an adult, they drown their own desires in work, relationships, obligations. Silence becomes terrifying because it's the only moment their buried voice can rise. Or consider someone who spent their whole life trying to be the responsible one, the one who holds everyone together. They never learned how to rest, or feel, or ask for support. So when life slows down, they feel lost, not because they're alone, but because they've never learned how to be someone who is not performing. And then you have the modern landscape, endless scrolling, constant stimulation, comparison culture. You can spend hours online consuming other people's lives and still feel starved inside. That's because distraction isn't nourishment. It's anesthesia. It numbs the ache, but it never heals it. The moment the screen turns off, the emptiness comes rushing back. You can drown it in workaholism, emotional dependency, casual relationships, home projects, travel, alcohol, hustle culture, overgiving, whatever flavor of escape you prefer. But no matter how fast you run, what you run from always catches up in the silence. Here's the truth you already know but rarely say out loud: emptiness is not a flaw. It's feedback. It's your soul telling you, something is wrong here. I'm missing from my own life. And ignoring that message doesn't make it go away. It makes it louder. That's why you can be successful and still feel numb. That's why you can be in a relationship and still feel alone. That's why you can have a full social calendar and still feel disconnected. The emptiness isn't about others failing you. It's about you being disconnected from yourself. And let's go deeper. Sometimes emptiness comes from unprocessed pain, things you survived but never acknowledged. Childhood wounds, betrayals, disappointments, losses you never gave yourself permission to grieve. When you don't deal with emotional pain, it doesn't disappear. It settles. It hides. It hardens. And eventually it creates a void where joy, desire, and purpose are meant to live. That void doesn't fill with more activities. It doesn't fill with attention. It doesn't fill with keeping busy. It fills only when the wounds beneath it are brought into the light. Other times emptiness comes from living a life that isn't actually yours. A career chosen for security, not passion. A relationship maintained for comfort, not connection. A lifestyle built on what you were taught to want, not what you truly crave. A schedule packed with obligations that drain you. When your life no longer reflects your truth, your soul begins to shut down. And the emptiness is simply the echo of your disengagement. But here's the powerful part: emptiness is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the moment your inner life says, I can't keep going like this. It's a call to stop repeating, stop performing, stop numbing, and start listening. Because emptiness isn't here to break you. It's here to wake you up. So ask yourself, what am I running from? What part of me have I silenced? What truth have I avoided because I was afraid of what it might change? What needs to be healed, acknowledged, reclaimed? These questions are uncomfortable. They're not the kind you answer in 5 minutes. They're the kind you wrestle with. The kind that change you. But once you start asking them, emptiness transforms. It stops being a void and becomes a space where something new, honest, and deeply yours can finally emerge. And that point leads directly to the next stage, turning that painful silence into a healing one, where solitude is no longer a place you fear, but a place where you finally meet the person you were meant to become. At some point, you reach a moment when running stops working. When distractions lose their flavor. When even the things that used to comfort you suddenly feel shallow. When silence, instead of chasing you, sits beside you and refuses to leave. And in that moment, you're faced with a choice: continue numbing your emptiness or finally listen to it. This is the turning point, the place where loneliness begins to transform into strength, into clarity, into the kind of solitude that builds a powerful inner life. The transformation doesn't start with motivation or inspirational quotes. It begins with acceptance. Honest, uncomfortable, unfiltered acceptance. The kind where you look at yourself and say, yes, something is missing. And it's me. Most people think acceptance means giving up. In reality, it's the first act of responsibility. You cannot rebuild a house if you won't admit the foundation is cracked. You cannot reclaim your life if you keep pretending everything is fine. Acceptance is not weakness. It's courage. It's the moment you stop fighting your own experience and begin working with it. Once acceptance enters the room, the real work begins, the dive inward. And I won't sugarcoat it, this part is not pretty. Sitting with yourself in deep silence can feel like walking into a room where you left unfinished business scattered everywhere. Old wounds you never addressed. Emotions you shoved down because you didn't have time for them. Dreams you abandoned. Parts of yourself you rejected to fit in. And when the noise stops, all of it comes forward, asking to be seen. But here's the truth: healing doesn't begin with answers. It begins with honesty. The moment you can sit with yourself without reaching for your phone, without needing a distraction, without escaping into busyness, your inner life starts to reorganize itself. One of the most powerful tools in this transformation is self-listening. And I'm not talking about passive thinking or overanalyzing. I'm talking about deliberate, conscious presence. Taking time each day, even 5 minutes, to ask yourself, what am I actually feeling? What do I want right now? What am I avoiding? Most people don't know these answers because they've never asked the questions. Journaling, reflective breathing, mindful walks, quiet mornings before the day begins, these practices aren't cliches. They are pathways back to yourself. They help you reconnect with your instincts, your values, your truth. Here's something most adults never realize: solitude is a skill. And like any skill, it gets stronger with practice. At first, sitting alone with your thoughts feels uncomfortable because you've spent years avoiding them. But little by little, the discomfort fades. Your inner world becomes less hostile, less overwhelming, less chaotic. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to hear your intuition, the voice you muted for years because life was too loud. And that intuition is powerful. It shows you what you need, what you've outgrown, what you must walk toward, and what you must walk away from. Solitude becomes not an escape, but a compass. And here's where everything shifts. When solitude becomes a choice instead of a sentence, your relationship with the world changes. You no longer enter relationships from a place of neediness. You don't cling to people because you fear being alone. You don't settle for crumbs because you finally understand your own worth. You start choosing people, not chasing them. You speak up for yourself because you trust your voice. You make decisions based on alignment, not fear. You set boundaries, not to block others, but to protect your inner clarity. When you learn to sustain your own company with dignity, you stop needing validation to feel alive. You start loving people from overflow, not from desperation. And that makes your connections deeper, healthier, and far more authentic. Let's talk about inner space, the invisible home you build inside yourself. This space grows every time you choose presence over distraction. It grows when you read something that expands your mind. It grows when you sit in nature long enough to feel your nervous system settle. It grows when you meditate, when you breathe deeply, when you pay attention to your emotions instead of suppressing them. This inner space becomes your sanctuary, the place no one else controls, no one else can damage, no one else can take away. And once you have that, the world loses its power to shake you. But remember this, solitude is not isolation. Isolation is escape. Solitude is presence. Isolation is fear. Solitude is strength. Isolation shuts the door on the world. Solitude opens a door within yourself. And that difference is everything. People who live in isolation withdraw because they don't want to feel. People who embrace solitude engage with life more fully because they've learned to feel without being controlled by those feelings. Transforming loneliness into solitude is an act of inner revolution. It's deciding that you will no longer abandon yourself. It's choosing to show up for your life with clarity instead of chaos. It's learning to enjoy your own company, not because you don't need others, but because you finally know who you are. And the moment you reach that point, something extraordinary happens. The silence that once scared you becomes the silence that frees you. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped running? What would happen if you treated solitude not as a punishment, but as preparation? What would your life look like if you trusted yourself enough to listen? The turning point isn't a dramatic event. It's a quiet decision. A shift. A moment of truth. You don't transform loneliness by filling your life with noise. You transform it by filling your inner world with presence. And when you do that, when solitude becomes your strength, your whole life begins to rise from the inside out. At some point in your life, you realize that the biggest threat you face isn't the world around you. It isn't other people. It isn't circumstances, setbacks, or failures. The biggest threat, the one that quietly shapes everything, is the habit of running from yourself. We fill our lives with noise, commitments, screens, relationships, work, errands, distractions, anything to keep us from facing what's inside. And the tragedy is that most people never stop. They spend decades in motion, decades avoiding the truth, decades living in a body that's present but a soul that's absent. But there comes a day, maybe you've already felt it, when the running exhausts you. Not physically. Spiritually. Emotionally. Deep inside. And that's when a different path opens, one that leads not outward, but inward. That's the path of building a real relationship with yourself. Let's be honest, modern life makes it incredibly easy to run. You can lose yourself in workaholism and call it productivity. You can lose yourself in relationships and call it love. You can lose yourself in your phone and call it connection. You can drown in Netflix, shopping, dating apps, social media, home projects, food, alcohol, countless ways to stay busy without ever being present. These patterns don't look like avoidance, but avoidance is exactly what they are. And the price? Anxiety that never goes away. A sense of emptiness that resurfaces every night. A quiet fear that something essential is missing. This is the cost of becoming a stranger to yourself. Kierkegaard called this state silent despair. And he was right. It's a kind of sadness so deep you don't even realize you're carrying it. You wake up with it. You go to work with it. You laugh with it. You eat dinner with it. You sleep with it. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle, like a background hum that never stops. And the reason it never stops is simple: you've built an entire life without including yourself in it. You've been performing, pleasing, surviving, but not living. And you can feel the tension, even if you don't always have words for it. Schopenhauer approached this from a different angle. He believed that people who cannot be alone cannot be free. They are chained to the world, dependent on noise, applause, distraction, stimulation. Their happiness is always borrowed. Their peace is always conditional. Their identity is always tied to something outside themselves. But those who learn to be alone, truly alone, without fear, become self-sufficient. Not isolated. Whole. They carry their home within them. That's real power. Not dominance. not perfection. Inner solidity. And here's where modern psychology bridges the gap between philosophy and everyday life. Emotional suffering begins where self-connection ends. When you don't know yourself, you make decisions that betray you. When you don't listen to yourself, you repeat patterns that hurt you. When you don't trust yourself, you depend on others to tell you who you are, what you're worth, what you deserve. And that dependency leads to disappointment again and again. Because no one can be the anchor you refuse to be for yourself. No one can fill the void left by your own absence. So how do you stop running? How do you build an unshakable relationship with yourself? You start with presence. Presence is not meditation or deep breathing, although those help. Presence is the moment you pause before reacting. The moment you ask yourself, what do I really feel? The moment you choose alignment over approval. The moment you stop abandoning yourself in order to keep the peace with others. Presence is not an event. It's a habit. It's choosing yourself in small moments until those small moments become your way of living. Then comes truth. Real truth, the messy, uncomfortable kind that doesn't fit into pretty quotes. You have to stop pretending. Stop pretending you're okay when you're not. Stop pretending you're fulfilled when you're empty. Stop pretending you're connected when you feel lonely. Stop pretending your relationships are healthy when they're not. Stop pretending your goals excite you when they actually drain you. Truth is the foundation of any real relationship, including the relationship with yourself. And without it, everything collapses. After truth comes responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility. Blame keeps you stuck. Responsibility gives you power. Responsibility says, I may not have chosen what happened to me, but I can choose what I do next. Responsibility turns you from a passenger into the driver of your life. This is the stage where you stop waiting for others to fix you, save you, validate you, or complete you. You begin building the structure of your inner life, boundaries, clarity, priorities, values. You start saying no when you mean no. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You start choosing experiences, relationships, and environments that match who you're becoming, not who you used to be. And once you reach this stage, something remarkable happens. The loneliness that once felt like a curse transforms into solitude that feels like a blessing. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your own judgment. You begin to look forward to moments of quiet. You begin to feel grounded, centered, steady. You stop depending on the world to keep you afloat. You become your own anchor. Let me tell you something essential. Those who learn to stand alone don't become cold, distant, or unapproachable. They become peaceful. They become selective. They become deeply present. Their relationships improve because they're no longer seeking rescue, they're seeking resonance. They no longer accept crumbs because wholeness doesn't bargain. They no longer tolerate chaos because they know the value of calm. They no longer betray themselves because they finally understand what they're worth. So here's the choice in front of you. Keep running from yourself or start walking toward yourself. Keep building a life that looks good on the outside or build one that feels good on the inside. Keep drowning in distractions or build a sanctuary within your own soul. The truth is simple. You are the home you've been searching for. And once you finally arrive there, fully, honestly, without fear, your life stops being something you endure and becomes something you inhabit. No more running. It's time to come home. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I know your time is valuable. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even one moment of clarity or peace, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. A simple like, a comment with your thoughts, or subscribing to the channel helps this community grow, and it helps more people who might need these words to find them. Share your reflections below. I do read them. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care of your peace.